This is Duke University.
So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. My name is Anna Jacobs, and I work for Duke Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Um, and we are here collaborating with the Career Center on this event. At Duke INE, we serve all of Duke University, whether that's undergraduates, graduate students, faculty, staff, and we really try to enable the entire university to act entrepreneurially in all endeavors. And so that, of course, includes in your career. And so we love to team up with the Career Center to bring you events like this where you can really get a taste of what it would be like to work at a startup and maybe one day even found your own startup.
So I am Christina Plant. I work with the Duke Career Center and I lead the innovation, entrepreneurship, and design career community. I'm also a career advisor, so you can meet with me to discuss career exploration, the job search, understanding the innovation, entrepreneurship, design kind of landscape. And I also have the career community. Then I'll put this in the chat so you all can just check it out and see what resources it has to offer. Um, and there we are. Thank you.
All right, perfect. So we are going to try to launch right into things. I know that we are all busy and have busy evenings. Just a couple of notes. As far as questions, if folks could, you're welcome to put your questions in the chat, and then I'm going to kind of collect those throughout the session. And then toward the end, depending on how much time we have, I will share those with Michelle, who is our moderator. And I think that that is really all that we wanted to go over. We're excited about this topic. It's something that Christina and I, as we've talked, we both talk to students a lot, that comes up, and students who maybe don't have a tech background, who don't see themselves in startup roles. And so we were really hoping to expose all of our attendees, whether you're an alum or whether you're a student, to different career possibilities that maybe you didn't know existed, and some advice on how to proceed in your job search and how to stand out, and what might be available and what you might be well suited for, but you just don't know it yet. So with that, thank you so much. I'm going to pass it to Michelle, who's going to introduce herself, and then each of our panelists will introduce themselves, Julia, and then Alexandra and Olivia. So thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Anna and Christina, and welcome everyone. I'm thrilled to be here as your moderator for tonight's panel, which is on startup careers for liberal arts majors. My name is Michelle Addison, as Anna said, and I'm a Duke MBA grad from 2023. I was an attorney turned MBA serial entrepreneur. I have my own startup called Allergood. I also do innovation consulting for GuideWell, which is a health solutions company. And I was a liberal arts major myself, political science and African American studies. So I've been there too. I'm currently a mentor in residence at Duke Innovation Entrepreneurship, and I've had the opportunity to work with some awesome founders this year. And I know firsthand that startups really need critical thinkers and problem solvers and people that are strong communicators. And those are all skills that a liberal arts education helps to develop. So today, as Anna said, we have an awesome group of panelists that will share their insights and experiences in navigating the startup world with non-technical backgrounds. I think I'm just going to jump in so we can get as much time as possible with them. Startups are really known for moving fast and being adaptable, and liberal arts graduates, I think, bring really unique skill sets to the table, sometimes in ways that I think they don't even realize. And so I want to start talking about how liberal arts skills translate into specific roles in startups. And so my first question to the panelists is, Oh, actually, sorry. We need to do introductions. I'm jumping in. I'm going so quick. Sorry. So let's start with our introductions. I know who you are. So in my mind, I'm ready to hear all the tidbits that you have to tell us, but everyone here doesn't know who you are. So, Alexandra, if you wouldn't mind starting with maybe just sharing your name, your current role, what your liberal arts background is, and a little bit about the work you do in the startup ecosystem, that would be super helpful. And then if you have any quick personal story about how your own liberal arts education help to fuel your career path, please feel free to throw that in as well.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Alexandra Spiegel. I'm a people operations manager at Loop Returns, which is an e-commerce company focused on simplifying merchant commerce operations. I'm also known for at the company sending Duke basketball gifts in the company Slack because I'm a 2016 Duke graduate and I majored in public policy and Spanish, and I minored in education. In my role, I manage two teams that are on our people team, or HR, and they're a people operations team, which plays a key role in our employee experience. We lead compensation and benefits. We maintain our systems to keep all of our people data clean, and we stay on top of our compliance, which helps us mitigate risk. And then our other team is our people business partner team, which aligns our business strategy with our people strategy, which makes sure that we have the right people to meet our business objectives. And then, you know, this kind of touches on the question that Michelle teed up, and we will get to in a little bit, but my first role was in a marketing focused role, and truthfully, I didn't really connect with that work. I wasn't really good at it, but I enjoyed things that had to do with my colleagues, and I found myself pursuing an HR path. And the deeper I got into this path, the more parallels I saw between my public policy background and my role. I was writing company policies. I influenced different stakeholders to support our programming. And I write a lot. And if you're a public policy major, you know, we write a lot of memos. So if you think of your company like a little country, you are doing the policy. So that's just a little bit more about how my liberal arts degree shaped my career path.
I love that tie-in. That's great. Thank you. Olivia, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'm happy to. My name's Olivia Coletta. I am from the class of 2021, so a big COVID year. I live in New York now. I'm originally from Chicago. And currently, I am the head of special projects at a stealth startup that's focused on a digital wellness solution for families. Previously, I was at another startup in sort of a community engagement role in women's health. What's a stealth startup? Good question. So a stealth startup is a startup that hasn't like release their name and their product to the world yet. So it's not like we have a website that you can go to and learn about us, or we're an app, so download it in the App Store. But we will launch soon. Yes, top secret. My background at Duke was super focused on international comparative studies. I was very involved in the Duke Keenan Ethics Center as well, and then innovation and entrepreneurship. And I didn't really know and still don't know exactly what I want to do, but I knew that I really liked, I guess similar to Alex, like people and cultures and understanding like how people tick and what motivates them, and, you know, understanding in our like current landscape today, how to solve some of our most pressing problems. And one of the many avenues that you can take is in startups. And so have started my career in that space. And I'm happy to, you know, chat about during this panel, you know, specifically how as a young grad, you know, you can kind of get your feet beneath you in the professional world in this sphere.
That all sounds fascinating, and I'm sure everyone can't wait to learn more. Julia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Julia Chou, COO at Abridge. We're a company in the generative AI space for healthcare, specifically focused on transforming doctor-patient conversations into draft clinical notes for doctors to really get a head start on their documentation and for patients to have a better idea of actually what's going on in their care. A little bit about myself. I graduated from Duke in 2010, public policy, global health. Thought I would either end up on the Hill, doing something like possibly at a think tank, but my dual love was actually technology, and I was an early beta tester for all things Google products. And at the time, I found myself, my first job out of college was actually at Google. And what I did was bring Google products to emerging markets. And so was a pretty incredible way as a new grad to really start to understand what does it take to bring technology to new markets, to different types of users around the world. And after doing that for a number of years, I ended up catching the startup bug. I wanted to have more impact, more ownership. I left Google to co-found a company called Binti that was focused on streamlining documentation for prospective adoptive and foster care parents. Did that for a couple of years, raised capital, hired a team, pivoted the company, did all the sorts of things that you do in the early stages of a company, and then decided that I wanted to pursue something different and thought that I wanted to do something in the food space. And so I actually left technology altogether, went to cooking school, worked at a Michelin star restaurant for some time, and was on the precipice of starting a food business when, as luck has it, I was about to move from San Francisco to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my Duke college roommate actually met somebody at a conference that was from Pittsburgh, and it was like, you should meet this person. You need new friends. So it turns out that this person that I met in Pittsburgh ended up becoming the CEO and founder of Abridge, the company I'm at now. And so great story of how networking can kind of make things happen here. But in terms of my role at Abridge, so I joined as the first business hire back in 2019 and have worn many different hats throughout the life of the startup, everything from figuring out our office space and ordering snacks for the office to figuring out what data analytics platform to use, to building our first website, to hiring all of the teams that actually do all of these things, to today, where I sit directly at the intersection of all of our many cross-functional teams and ensure that we continue to grow and scale to build one of the most inspiring cultures to work at, to ultimately bring impact and help patients and clinicians across the country. Duke is actually one of our most recent customers, so that's been a special moment for me personally.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. Wow. Thank you all. I'm really excited to dive into this discussion. As I had mentioned earlier, when I eagerly jumped in, I'd like to start by talking about how liberal arts skills translate to specific roles in startups. And so I'd love to hear from each of you how, I think you gave us a little tidbit, a little teaser, but how did your liberal arts education prepare you for your startup career? And what skills from your background have really helped you succeed in your role?
I think that when it comes to the liberal arts education, those skills that have given me an edge in the startup world, a few ones that I think of are the ability to write well and to edit well. I mentioned I write a lot of policies, and that is important, but I write a lot of emails. I'm communicating constantly, whether it is with my direct reports, whether it is with managers, whether it's with our CEO, and then being able to write messages that work for that person and adjusting my messaging, that is incredibly critical. And it's a skill that I've definitely picked up while, I was at Duke. And then, Michelle, you mentioned it earlier, but critical thinking, it is so important. And it's not necessarily the critical thinking that, you all might be used to when you think about reading a text and, critically thinking about that. But it's the ability to not just stop when you've hit a challenge or you've hit a blocker, or think that you've solved a problem once you've kind of just hit the first step. It's always going a step beyond that, asking yourself, what are the risks I haven't thought about? What are my blind spots? What is something that I'm just not expecting, so that you can see around the corner. It doesn't mean that you're going to stop with what you're doing. It simply means you need to be prepared for that. You need to think through things so that you can really go above and beyond with whatever you're presenting. And the ability to take it one step further is something that I believe that I was able to develop and cultivate during my time at Duke. So those certainly have been the liberal arts skills that I know have given me a huge edge during my career.
That's awesome. Olivia?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I connected with Anna, and I worked really closely together when I was at Duke, which makes this really fun. And so we reconnected, I guess it was last week, just to talk about the panel. And she was giving me, the background of how this came to be. And I said to her, I was like, I don't know why all of these students think you need to have a technical background to work at a startup. I've been at 2 different startups now, and the people who have had the most impact on the business have been non-technical people. Whether it's the CEO who doesn't have a technical background, or someone on the product team who doesn't have a technical background, or myself who has really straddled all different parts of the business. Typically, if you're an engineer, you're taking orders from someone else. You don't have the creative, I'm not saying you don't have the creative juice, but that's not your job function, which I think a lot of engineers get to a startup and they're really frustrated that that's not what it is, but that is typically how it goes. And then at the last startup I was at, I would get really frustrated with the finance people because they would dig around in this model all day. And I was like, but if we're not selling anything, it doesn't matter what your model is. Of course, you need to have an understanding of your margins and whatnot, but there can be, I think when you come from a super technical background, you're so focused on the task you're doing that you can't see the big picture. And so I found that really my study of people at Duke and stories and connection and what makes people tick has been so incredibly helpful in me driving business value, whether I'm working on marketing or operations or product or just high level strategy, and has been, an edge when people come up a more traditional, whether it's consulting, investment banking, engineering background.
I think just building on what both Alexandra and Olivia have said, I think that the value of a liberal arts education is that it equips you to be flexible and adaptable in a world that is continuously evolving. I think that in the kinds of roles that I've inhabited, some of the things that were already mentioned, like critical thinking, the ability to tell a compelling story, the ability to crisply communicate, whether in writing or words, spoken words, is incredibly important to be able to actually cut through the noise and understand what are the things that are actually going to drive the business forward, and what are the best ways to ensure that everybody remains on the same page. I think that particularly in a startup, there's the early incubation stage where maybe you know everybody and you know exactly what they're working on. And then as you grow in size, all of a sudden, it's not as clear. People aren't as aligned. There starts to be a little bit more things happening in silos. And it's really important to have the skills and the tools to be able to say, all right, everybody, let's get back on the same page. And I feel like that for me, and the comfort with ambiguity and navigating uncharted waters is something that liberal arts education really, really prepared me well for. Maybe finally, I would say that I know that AI is a big topic, and I'm also in the AI business as well. But because of the pace of change, everything from the regulatory side of things to the tools we use to the ways that we do work, I think that the ability to really adapt and evolve and to embrace new tools and to understand what are the positive ways in which you can use it, as well as some of the ways that it can actually detract from work as well. Like having the clear eyes and the ability to really assess how to make the best use of technology is also something that I feel like I got from my liberal arts education as well.
Thank you. That was super insightful. And honestly, as a non-technical tech founder, a lot of what you said really resonated with me. And the adaptability of these skills is really important. So I'm going to shift gears and talk about how students can stand out when searching for startup jobs. I saw some questions there already, regarding finding a job at a stealth startup. How do you do that? So I know it's top of mind. Um, for folks on this call. So we know that startups often will have different hiring processes than a more structured, large, traditional company might have. And, startups value initiative and creativity. And Julia, you already mentioned wearing multiple hats, which I think truly defines, the startup world. What would you say is the best way for liberal arts grads to demonstrate their value during the hiring process? And maybe we can start with Julia so you don't feel like you're always the last one, but would love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. I think that for me and for many of my friends who've been in startups, a lot of it is network based. And so, for example, with my first startup, Binti, the reason that came about was because my friend was thinking of starting this company, and I was thinking about dipping my toes into startups, and I offered to just take a week off of work and just like hang out with her and work together with her and see how it went, and it went really well. And so we're like, actually, let's do this together. And with many other cases too, like I think that a lot of things start with just informational interviews. So finding people that reaching out, asking like, hey, can I grab a cup of coffee with you, or just to do a quick Zoom chat to understand what it is that you do and how do you do it. And I think that's one really interesting way to get to know someone. With Abridge, for example, it was a kind of opportunity that when I first heard about it, um, it reminded me a little bit of how I'd felt about Uber and Airbnb in those early years, where it was 2018, this idea of recording doctor-patient conversations felt a little cognitively dissonant, a little uncomfortable. And yet it was the kind of idea too where I felt this pull where I was like, there's something really interesting about this idea. And if we can look past what it'll take to actually get there, there's something really, really great here. But I think having an idea is not enough. You need to also really understand who you're working with. And I think people really drive the success of any company. And at a startup, you don't have a lot of people. And so you need to really make sure that you're going to work well with those people. And so for Abridge, for example, I did a number of working sessions with our CEO and founder before I got started, just to make sure that we would have a good working relationship as well, and that it was the kind of long-term team and culture that I felt like I would want to build as well.
That's great advice. I think the fit both ways is really important. So I think that's great that you hit on that. Alexandra, would you like to go next?
Sure. Echoing, the sentiment that Julia mentioned, one, thinking through your network or those that you've connected with, they play such an important role. I think it's so nice when you have a connector who's able to connect you with those. Julia had mentioned, hey, I have a friend of a friend. It's nice because it's not necessarily a cold reach out, which you certainly can do. I would recommend, if you're going to do a cold reach out, that you share a purpose and share, like, I'd really love to learn X, Y, and Z, because this is a person who probably gets like 10 or so requests for cold conversations, and you want to really show like why you're someone they should spend time chatting with. But if you have sort of that warm connection, it's more likely they'll say yes, you can have that conversation. I think also, if you have mentors, learning more from them, asking them around how have they explored the startup process, what did they learn, Ask them how they prepared for interviews or conversations. Ask them about some of their best interviews or networking opportunities. Ask them about their worst ones and why, so that you learn not only what you should be doing, but also what you shouldn't be doing, because it's really nice for you to not be making mistakes that other people have made, because that way you're standing out for positive reasons versus maybe some more negative ones. I will say that when you do have opportunities to, and your foot is in the door with a founder or a team, making sure that you have put in a level of work so that they know that you are someone that they want to continue that relationship with. Maybe you are talking to them about a client-facing role that they kind of started thinking about. Show them that you've done the research into the types of customers that they're looking for, that you know the challenges their customers face, the gap that their company is looking to fill, and potentially the gaps that still exist, because those are probably the gaps that their company wants to go fill later. This is going to show, one, the initiative and the ownership, but it's also going to show that you are willing to put in the work to have great conversations and go above and beyond. They're taking a gamble when they hire someone, so you're demonstrating skills that you will have in the actual job ahead of time. And I think that's a great way to build trust and kind of sign before that occurs.
That's great advice. And you're right. Startups, I think, I don't know who hinted at it, but it's small teams, right? So they're taking a risk hiring you, and you also, want to show your value early on. That's great advice. Olivia?
Yeah. So I think one of the hard parts about startups is that it's a pretty atypical both application and hiring process. Like by the time a job description is up on a website, I would say it's too late. Like if you don't know someone who's connected you through, or you haven't done cold outreach that's really compelling, I can think of very, very, very few people that we've hired at either startup, through some sort of just application that someone uploaded, which is unfortunate because I think a lot of applicants are missed through that process, and it's not equitable, but it is just the reality. And so I think it's important to say that so that if you want to go work at a startup, you have to take a lot of initiative. And so I think that's the most important thing to show in the process, is that you're capable of that. And that can come from anything from your initial email outreach to follow up to giving ideas in an interview and elaborating on your answer and how you'd execute that, and just pushing the process forward. I've done a number of, or participated in a number of interviews where I'm on the other side and I'm interviewing someone else, and if I don't think that someone is demonstrating a lot of initiative, that's a non-starter, because people, just to put it bluntly, don't have time to hold your hand. And so if you're not, no one's expecting you to know it all on day one, but people are expecting you to try from day one. There aren't really any training wheels. You're just kind of put into the deep end. And so showing that you're able to swim is usually a way to really stand out, because a lot of people don't go the extra mile. And so I think if you do that, especially in today's workforce, it will take you pretty far. Just to answer real quickly the question about how to find a job at a self startup, that's where really the networking comes into play. So the woman I'm working for now, it's like a crazy set of events, but that's where I just always say, especially like for young people like us, like always say yes. Like go meet the person who, you know, your old boss says they'll connect you to, like go, you know, to your friend's party that they're hosting and meet a bunch of new people. Like you just never know who you're going to meet and where that's going to go. And so actually, like if I think about how I'm at my job today, it actually goes back, like if you follow the whole chain to pre-pandemic at a Duke women's event where I met this woman who were now very close friends, but she put me in touch with this other woman, and it starts this whole like chain of events. So you just never know who you're going to meet. Be open-minded, say yes, and take initiative.
I love that. I always say there's nothing, I've never walked away from a conversation where I've agreed to a coffee chat or an information interview and I haven't learned something, right? Like there's always something that comes out of it. So I love that.
Michelle, sorry, can I say one thing, one
Yes,
other
yes.
thing real quickly? Just because I think, you know, I remember when I was sitting in your shoes because it really wasn't that long ago. And I think, you know, what's gotten, as that people say, what's gotten you here won't get you there. Like, so much of getting into Duke is like checking a bunch of boxes. And I think the worst thing you can do through these processes, and especially in the saying yes thing, is like viewing things as transactional or like showing up to a call and being like, these are all my questions. And like, then I'm going to get them to recommend me for this role. Like, go in open-minded, like react on the fly, like when you're at a Duke INE event, like sit next to someone you wouldn't normally sit next to, whether it's like another student or, you know, someone who works at INE or an alum or whatnot. And just like don't view everything as checking a box because I don't think that will take you as far. Sorry, but thank you for letting me add that in.
Super helpful. Thank you so much. So we just discussed hiring and it's clear that it's about way more than your resume, right? It's about showing how you think. It's about showing how you problem solve. It's about really showcasing how you add value. So that's really, really helpful. I'm going to switch gears. I want to make sure we leave time for questions. So we'll try to do kind of like a speed round answer for this one, try to hit on the most important pieces that you think of when we talk about some of the common challenges that liberal arts grads might face when they're entering the startup ecosystem. You know, breaking into the startup world can be exciting, but it also comes with its own unique challenges, especially, you know, as people are thinking about not having a technical background for some of these roles. So when you think about these challenges, what comes to mind, kind of top of mind, and how do you think, you know, students can overcome this or anyone on this call can? And we can start with Olivia this time.
Yeah, biggest challenges, and specifically from a non-technical background, I think it's really like getting that initial experience when you don't have a hard skill set as far as like a software engineer, like they took all these engineering classes and so now they can like point to that in an application. You know, it's not as much like direct experience for liberal arts graduates, which like I said, you can probably glean from the rest of my answers, I really think is a superpower. And so you just really have to start getting experience. My like very first internship I did through a startup was a fellow Melissa and Doug founder. She had a startup in Durham. It was called Outreach. I wasn't even like connected to her through like Duke. I just reached out on my own. I like demonstrated what I thought I could do for them. And like we met and I ended up joining. And those are still like examples or there's pieces of work I did in that job that I still reference when talking about my career today, or that I look back to like draw upon for something I'm working on in the present. So yeah, I think just get experience as early as you can because, you know, when you're in college, it's a lot easier to like get your foot in the door. I think when you're out of college, it gets a little bit more difficult. So stack up those internship experiences, even if it's just like 5 hours a week during the school year. It doesn't have to be, you know, over the summer, 40 hours a week and you get paid, you know.
That's great advice. And I know startups are usually eager for extra hands. So I think often that's an easier sell maybe than a full-time role or something like that would be. So I think that's great advice. Julia.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the main things about coming into a startup is that oftentimes people aren't going to be telling you what to do. There's a lot of white space, and I think that it is your job to figure out how to be most helpful. And so coming into, especially an early stage startup, I think there's any number of things that you could be working on at any given point in time. There's not going to be process. There's not going to be a team that's there to help you figure things out. Like you're probably going to have to create it. And so I think making sure that you understand clearly what are the guiding principles that will help you make those decisions, who can help you make those decisions if it's not you, and how can you empower other people to really grow and fly. In my role in terms of operations, I see this function in particular as a bit of a Swiss Army knife type of role. It looks a little bit different at every single company, but that's because of the people that really run this kind of function. Um, and for me, in the way that operations has shaped out in my existing organization, it currently consists of marketing and customer support and people and generally like the set of people who make sure that the connective tissue in the company is running is really strong. And a lot of that is because I think those are the things that I naturally spike in. And so I think there's a lot of latitude to create your own role, but it also takes courage to make sure that you're continuing to put yourself in those types of situations that are good for yourself and your set of skills, but are also value additive for the business.
That's great. Yeah, I know I often feel like I'm still building the plane while flying it, right? And so there's that piece of it every day. Alexandra?
Yeah. Truthfully, I think the challenges that new graduates with liberal arts backgrounds face are kind of similar to the challenges that those who have engineering or computer science degrees face because it's the transition from being in an academic setting to a professional setting. It's kind of a tough transition, truthfully. I want you all to know y'all are really smart people. You can learn functionally, the art or, the practice of project management or the practice of digital marketing. There are books, there are blogs, there are resources. You'll figure it out. Where I see people missing the mark is they're not able to adapt to this new the new culture. Julia spoke to it. You've got a lot more flexibility. You've got autonomy. You can make different decisions now, and you have to be able to adapt to it in order to be successful. And that is going to be one of the harder transitions you have had for most of your career or your life so far, like a clear checkbox of, okay, I'm going to do well in elementary school and middle school and high school and in Duke. And now it's a lot more free. So I think that's truthfully the hardest part.
Those are super helpful perspectives. Thank you. I want to open it up to the audience for questions because I know they've been rolling in slowly. Anna, I know you were collecting them. I don't know if you, or I can scroll as well.
Yeah, so I DM'd
Oh,
you
perfect.
the first one, yeah, and then I'll send some more.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so the first one I see here is, what is your best advice for writing a good email? And I imagine, Anna, this is probably in relation to like reaching out and starting that networking process.
I
and
think
getting
so.
that
I
energy
think
conversation.
Cyril is the one who submitted this, so feel free to provide any color to your question, but that was my understanding, yeah.
Okay. If somebody has a good a good answer for this one and wants to jump in, feel free, but just some advice for writing a good email when you're doing that initial outreach.
I'm happy to jump in. I think you have to, and this is kind of what I was saying before, but like be memorable and show that like you have some value to bring to the table. And so I think there's a variety of different ways that you can do it, but I think one is showing like genuine interest in the company. So tying it to something very specific about yourself, whether it's your upbringing or your time at Duke or, some other anecdote. I think that goes a really long way. And then talking about like what you'd want to do for them. Like, why are you, I guess I already said to explain about like why you're passionate about the work, but are you a product, really interested in product and there's like some specific part of their product that you're really intrigued by and would want to work on? Is it marketing? And you actually think they'd be really great at marketing to this other audience as well. And have they ever considered it? And like this is what you might do. Like I think that can really like it can really stick with the person who's receiving that email and think, one, this person took a lot of time and like consideration to do this. They couldn't just copy and paste it and like send it to the next person on their list. And two, like there's actually some alignment here and I want to talk to them. So that would be my advice. And I think the more specific you can be, the better too.
And Julia shared an awesome, I think it's a blog post and the actual email she wrote. So this is super, super valuable. Thank you. Please check the chat there. And if Alexandra, if you or Julia have anything you want to add, please feel free. The second question we have, I think, is a great one, and this applies, I think, no matter what your major is or your background, technical or not technical. But when you're more of an introvert, what tips do you have for getting out there and doing some really quality networking?
I am a self-proclaimed introvert. I can flip to be an extrovert when I need to be, but my happy place is downtime with myself. And in terms of where I get energy, like the big networking events, I really, really struggle with, frankly. But where I actually get a lot of value and develop really quality relationships is in establishing informational interviews and coffee chats and making sure that there's space to really spread out on a particular topic. And so oftentimes what I'll do is I'll have actually an email snippet that I'll customize to folks. And actually on the email topic, our CEO actually used to is a practicing cardiologist as well, and his cold email intro used to be cold intro, warm heart, something like that, which is kind of funny. But it's like, what's the memorable thing that'll get you to stand out within that email? But then I just have I have something ready to go. I tailor it to what it is I'm hoping to learn from that person. And I'll also maybe send it to a few people and just ask for their help too. Like, hey, I'm hoping to learn more about somebody who's actually done international expansion before. Who do you know that I can talk to? Or I'm having this tricky situation on performance management. Like, how have you dealt with this before? Or who are some people that you would people, books, resources that you would be willing to point me to? And so I think finding those ways where it's maybe not such like a big conference or networking event have been really, really valuable to me.
And I would add on top of that, finding things that are authentic and genuine to you is going to be wonderful. So if you're someone who is not a huge extrovert, finding maybe more curated spaces, if you can find events for, folks who are in your specific space. If you're really passionate about clean tech, finding spaces that are very clean tech centric so that you're with folks who are in a specific industry and one that you feel more comfortable talking about, because then you're going to flex that muscle, you're going to practice, you're going to get more reps in a way that's a little bit more comfortable to you. And then the second thing is, don't be afraid to be a little bit challenged at times. That is part of also being in a startup. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It is okay to put yourself out and be challenged sometimes, because that is typically what is going to happen in work. You are going to be uncomfortable times. It is okay to also at times be like, I am not in a place where I want to be uncomfortable right now. That's okay. But don't also be afraid and say, like, because it's uncomfortable, I will never do it. Challenge yourself, maybe say once a quarter, I'm going to do something that scares me and makes me uncomfortable. And I will know I'm going to stand in the corner for 10 minutes by myself until I feel comfortable to talk to someone. That is okay too, because you've challenged yourself to do something that is scary. And that's something to be proud of too.
That's great. Thank you both. And I love that you both highlighted that networking is kind of what you make it. It could be a big event. It could be something one-on-one. It's different situations and they are all equally valuable. So that's awesome. Another question we have is, I think liberal arts majors sometimes pursue their majors because they are purpose-driven. So there's something that they're really passionate about, that they're purpose-driven. And so when they're looking at startups, how do you balance being purpose-driven with more of, bluntly, I think like a capitalistic drive or something like that was in the question, but this, more money-driven mindset, like how would you say is a great way when someone's looking at a startup to bridge those two things?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this because I consider my work to be very purpose driven, and that's actually why I was really drawn to startups. Was I'd worked in more of a government context through an internship. I'd worked in more of a nonprofit context, and I wanted to be an environment that could like iterate quickly and like build real solutions that people could use every day. And I think the startup space can, not always, but can be a space for that. I worked at a women's health startup before this that was specifically for women like 18 to 30 years old. This was right after Roe was overturned, and it was incredibly purpose-driven and whatnot. We also, unfortunately, like had some investors that weren't purpose-driven and were really, money driven and, kind of used the mission to capitalize. And it was really unfortunate, but it was a really helpful experience to see how some people can abuse that as well. So then when I was looking for my next gig, it was really important to me that if I touched a startup again, I felt really aligned from the get-go on like investors as well. So I would say like make sure you're on the same page with like the team, but also like make sure you're on the same page with like the investors' ethos, while understanding you are working at a for-profit business and therefore, you have to be able to eventually one day like demonstrate profitability. But I don't think those things have to be, in opposition. I think they can work together because at the end of the day, like we do live in a capitalistic society.
Yeah, echoing what Olivia said, I feel very fortunate to have found a place where it's mission aligned, we're making money, and it's like everything is working together. I think that there are many different ways to find meaning and purpose. For me personally, it was always important to work for a company where I felt like it was doing good in the world and where I didn't feel like I had to go to bed feeling like I had to take a shower because I did something that felt yucky. And I think that um, as you're getting started in your career, though, like there's so many companies out there and there's so many different ways that people are creating good for the world. And I think the question to ask yourself is, what are you optimizing for? Like, what is your version of good in the world? And for example, like for many people on like, let's say the support function side of things, like in customer support, you're actively making somebody's day better. You're problem solving, you're helping them resolve their issues. on the people side of the house, you're giving people economic opportunity. You're helping them actually figure out how do they find their meaning and purpose in the world and creating incredible cultures for them to grow in. And so even if the company's mission isn't necessarily something that you're like jumping out of joy for every day, I think that there are still like really meaningful ways for you to continue to grow in your career and to find your own meaning within that ecosystem as well.
That's a great point. Finding meaning beyond the mission of the company and coming up with your own mission. I love that. We have 5 minutes, but maybe really quickly, I saw a question in here regarding social entrepreneurship and if there's any resources that you've come across that you would recommend to anyone looking in that realm. And if not, if nothing comes to mind, we can follow up as Duke INE. And again, I'm a mentor in residence. I was liberal arts major. I'm a non-technical, tech founder. So if you want to book time with me, please find my MIR page. The link might be on there. And then you can book right into my Calendly. We can meet for 30 minutes and chat more specifically about questions you might have. But it brings us to the end of our discussion tonight. I feel like we could talk forever because you're all super fascinating and your backgrounds are amazing. I want to just say a huge thank you to you all for sharing your insights and really honest experiences. It's, I think, really valuable for everyone that's in attendance. And thank you, to all the attendees. I feel like we had some really quality questions as well. So I'm going to pass it back to Anna. I know she wanted to put the check-in link back up, and if there's any other closing remarks, she'll take over. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Alexandra, Olivia, Julia. It was not on purpose that we had all women on this panel, but I love it. I think we got so much good information and we were able to all benefit so much from all of your experience. So I really appreciate having you all here. Well, thank you all so much. This was incredible. Yes, Michelle is already seeing Calendly notifications. Amazing. Y'all don't waste any time. Thank you all again, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.